Hey, welcome back. As the days grow shorter and the nights stretch on, we find ourselves approaching the heart of winter. Nature is resting, wrapped in a hush that feels both quiet and alive, like holding your breath. This is the time of Winter Solstice, Midwinter, or Yule. This is when the longest night of the year gives way to the returning light. We're diving into the spirit of this magical season with some decorations and witchy crafts to bring light and warmth into your home. This is part one of a 3-part Winter Solstice special. Simple practices to guide you inward and help you journey toward being reborn with the returning light. We're kicking off the season with some dried orange decorations, but we're going to go a tad bit beyond the garland. So here are my best tips for dehydrating citrus or oranges. I suggest using clementines or tangerines or something smaller than a navel orange. Avoid the things that are going to be really, really big and slice them very thin. So I like to use a tomato knife, sometimes called a cheese knife, and then place them on parchment paper on your baking sheet. My oven has a dehydrate setting, so that's what I use, and I put it at 150 degrees. So put your oven as low as it can go, or your dehydrator on 150. If you have a vented or mesh type of pan or baking sheet, use that, but a regular baking sheet will work too. So put them in there, and you're gonna dehydrate them or put them in the oven and let them dry out. But before you do that, you want to pat them dry. So take a paper towel or take a cloth and just pat them dry so that you're getting some of that extra moisture off. Then you'll put them in the oven. Once they are in the oven, set your timer for 1 hour. After an hour, flip them over and put them back in. Repeat this process until completely dry. It took my batch of 24 about 4 hours, flipping every hour. You'll know that they're done when they're transparent, they're really crispy, and it looks like stained glass. Now let's use them. To make a citrus crescent moon wreath, you'll first cut about 1/3 of your wire wreath frame apart. I had a happy accident here. I was going to make a full wreath and found out I was going to run out of oranges, so a moon it became. After you cut it, make sure that you wrap it with what I used as electrical tape so that it creates that point at the end. I placed the oranges with a lot of hot glue, doing 2 parallel rows, keeping the middle sizes towards the center, and then making the smallest ones go on the end so that it tapered. And then I did a 3rd row of the largest slices that I had, and that went on the top, overlapping those 2 parallel rows that I did. It's pretty easy, actually. I just used a ton of glue. I also put some cinnamon sticks, bound them together with a clear quartz, and wrapped them up with some twine so that it amplified all of these energies of abundance and light and warmth and protection and just that warm family home feeling. And from there, I put greenery. I used fresh greenery. This is cedar that I happen to have, and I knew I would probably replace it as it started to dry out, so I didn't glue that. I just placed that on. And here she is. She's so beautiful. Tell me what you think. Do you think you'll be making one? I think this was a happy accident for sure. Since we just made the moon, now let's make the sun. We're going to be using the same oranges or citrus fruit. We're adding some more cinnamon sticks, and this time I'm using fresh bay leaves. You could use dry, they're a bit more fragile, but any type of tough leaf that you might have and be able to find fresh, like a lime leaf, would work just fine. So I'm eyeballing it a little bit here, laid it out to make sure things are evenly spaced, and then just using the hot glue and gluing them in place. And each time I add one of the leaves, I just lay it out and eyeball it, make sure it looks like everything is going to lay out just right in the end. So I did all of the leaves, leaving some spaces, and then I went back and glued in the cinnamon sticks so that there was one cinnamon stick in between each leaf. So you can see it kind of looks like a flower now, and then we're going to add the cinnamon sticks. And this turned out to be a really easy and beautiful craft too. And I'm really loving that these two orange crafts, these citrus dehydrated fruit crafts are, simple, they're easy to do. They definitely bring in the energy and the warmth and the magic, but there's something different than your average or your classic orange garland. Since winter solstice is all about bringing in the light and the return of the light, we have to make my favorite spell candles. Do this by getting some beeswax sheets and warming them first in your hands. You could also use a blow dryer or hair dryer on a low setting, but you want to warm them up so that they become more pliable. The next thing to do is to anoint it. I'm using my Blessings in Abundance oil here, but anything you want to use will work. And I'm doing this in a clockwise motion. Try to get that oil very evenly, thinly distributed. Next comes the herb blend that you want to use to dress your candle. I'm using sage, rosemary, mullein, and yarrow here, sprinkling that in very, very evenly. You want to make sure that your herbs are cut up really, really small, and so that way it's not a fire hazard. You want to make sure it is very evenly distributed and very thin. Then place your wick on the edge. Now for the rest of the candle, you're going to roll gently, but for this first one, you really want to push in there to make sure that your wick stays. And from there, you're just going to gently roll it. It'll be a little difficult at first, but it eventually will get going. And that way your candle is dressed from the inside. It's a lot safer, a lot easier to keep more of your ingredients inside the candle. That way when you're dressing it, if you're just rolling your candle, sometimes a lot of those ingredients fall off. And then this also keeps it less likely to be a fire hazard if you can make sure that they are very evenly distributed. So right at the end, give it a good roll and then press that seam down in there. You can also use the back of a heated spoon to melt it and make sure it doesn't unravel. Now the only thing left to do is to trim the wick and put it in a candle holder. So let's make a candle holder. I'm using a Turkish coffee cup that I got at an estate sale, and first I'm going to cleanse it with my magical cleansing spray. Our rituals this time of year change from year to year, but we typically do something with lighting a candle once a night for every night leading up to solstice. Now to hold the candle in place, I'm using the top of a Christmas ornament. They do make candle holders that you can put in there. So this works for something like this beeswax candle, which is really light. And I'm also using hot glue here. If you're using a heavier candle with a harder wax, then you'll probably want to use something a little bit sturdier to hold it in there. Now, like I said, we have a ritual every night where we burn a little bit of the candle. And to make that even easier, I picked up some of these automatic snuffers. So what you do is you put this around the candle and you set it to a certain area of the candle, and that's where you want it to automatically snuff out the candle when you are done with it. It's really cool, highly suggested. I think it's great for witches, especially if you can't burn a candle all the way, but you want to respectfully extinguish it and relight it in consecutive nights. It is a great thing to do. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this 3-part series. Please join me for the next 2 in this series. And don't forget to join me for the 12 nights of winter solstice rituals. I'd like to thank my Patreon and Coven members for their continued support. I could not do any of this without you. Blessed be.